Welcome to the Sexy Freedom Media Podcast, a place to discuss pain, passion, and pursuits.
Let's get it. I want to feel alive.
Breathe.
Make some moves.
Protect the throne. This is Sexy Freedom Media Podcast.
Welcome to the Sexy Freedom Media Podcast. It's your host, Helen Edwards-Ann.
January Liddell. Aloha.
Today we have a phenomenal guest, and I would love for her to introduce herself. Ali Hendry, welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your podcast. Yes, my name is Ali Hendry. My pronouns are she, her. I am a certified and credentialed level 2 PCC ICF coach, and I work with individuals, duos, and groups, specializing in relationships. I also work with people who want to improve their public speaking skills, and I also work in the DEI, JB, diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and belonging world as well. So lots of bits of me.
That's amazing, Ali. Welcome. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. And not sure if you mentioned TED Talk, but she is also a TED Talk speaker. So we please look at that and search for her.
Thank you very much. It's called Survivor's Guide to Jealousy, and it was about my foray into non-monogamy and how actually that supported me on my jealousy journey, which is kind of counterintuitive because you think if you're going to have more partners and you've got jealousy issues, it's going to make it worse. But actually, I found ways of it supporting me. So yeah, check it out if jealousy is part of your relationship story as well.
I found you really phenomenal. It's one of the reasons why, when I made the post about requiring some guests on our show, I wanted something different, something that just kind of ignited my soul, something that's a little bit different, but still is aligned with our message of freedom. And listening to your TED Talk, I was just like, oh my gosh, it's almost like you were telling my own story, just in your own way with different partners. But I could relate to a lot of it because I've definitely have a jealous bone in my body that I've had to have a lot of work on. Not that this episode's gonna swing that way, but I can't express enough how much it was really great to hear somebody speak out loud about that. And now women, we're all in a different place in our life, women over 40, it's one of the reasons why I invited you on, because I think you have a lot of experience just in your journey. And I think we'll go ahead and start with one of our questions here. Can you start by explaining what menopause is and some common terms associated with it, like premenopause, perimenopause, postmenopause? The menopauses, there's so much confusion with it. And I know, speaking for myself, it's hard when I go and ask a male doctor, or even sometimes female doctors, I get these short-term answers, which is great, but how does it connect with me? How does it connect with you, Ali, in your journey right now?
Yeah, it's the menopause family. Let's explore. And you're right, there has been a lot of work done in terms of research in the medical profession around how much training is given related to menopause, and it hasn't been looking great. So those people that are supposed to advise and guide us have not been able to provide the support that we need. And also a whole load of research is missing. It's getting better. There is more research coming up daily. However, the people who were tending to invest in research or carrying out that research weren't necessarily the kinds of people who were interested in exploring menopause and people's menopause journeys. Let's just put it that way. But things are changing, which is good. And there's some great resources out there. So yes, terminology. So we have perimenopause, and this is the first time that you start to get symptoms. Now, we do use the word symptoms. However, I prefer to think of menopause as a season, entering a new season, and I prefer to look at menopause from the point of view of changes. It does have a medical model associated to it, hence using the word symptoms. However, when we talk about different types of ways of handling those changes or treatments, again, to use a medical term, there are some holistic things that we can do. There are lifestyle things that we can do that are outside of that medical side of things. So we will probably use the word symptoms today, but I just really wanted to caveat it with thinking about different ways of looking at menopause that think about it as a season that we move into, as opposed to a disease or a problem or an issue or something that needs curing, because all of those things can split us off into places that undermine and devalue us as humans going through our menopause journey. So perimenopause relates to any changes that might happen, and some of those changes are common, some of them not so common. You'll have heard of things like hot flushes, sometimes called hot flashes, same thing, different word, hot flushes, hot flashes. You'll have heard of brain fog, which is where cognitive function changes. You'll have heard of problems with sleeping. You'll have heard of things like vaginal atrophy, and things like lubrication, so sex can become more painful if it's penetrative. So you'll have heard of all of those sorts of things. And those things start in perimenopause. The word menopause relates to that day when you have gone for 12 months in a row without menstruating. It's that technical when we talk about menopause. So the day that you have not menstruated, you haven't had your period for 12 consecutive months. After that day, everything else is post-menopause. Now, again, different people look at menopause in different ways. And some people say, actually, what's the point of having perimenopause, menopause, post-menopause? Let's just call it menopause. Let's not have this, because sometimes if you think about perimenopause, it's sort of like a harbinger of doom. Oh my goodness, what's coming my way? It's going to get terrible. When actually, we're just entering our menopause season. That's what happens. For some of us, it lasts for a while. For others of us, we get hardly any symptoms or changes. And for some of us, it carries on for years and years.
I love how you said seasons. That definitely gave me a whole new perspective of this new realm, this new changes, this new chapter in life. I like to say the chapters. I tell all my friends, because we're all growing together from our 20s, and I say, we are in the next chapter of our life going into our 40s, but we do all find it so confusing. And you don't have to mention your age unless you want to, but for yourself, how was that journey in? Were you asking the same questions? Were you scrounging around to figure out like what is happening? What does all this mean? Like, how was that for you?
It's a great question. I'm 55, happy, out and proud to be a 55er. And actually my menopause, in terms of the day when I stopped having periods for more than 12 months, was when I was 51. And that's bang on the average age. So the average age is between 46 and 52. Okay. There are variations, and there's a lot of research coming out at the moment around people of colour and the fact that due to racism and systemic stress that racism will cause, people of colour will have their menopause earlier. And sometimes this is a lot of research that's coming out now, and also things like hot flushes and other changes can be more severe for people of colour. So there's research around that. So for me, do you know what? It's really interesting, and there's a whole story and book in this, I guess, because I was in the non-monogamy world, and this is where I believe love is abundant. I believe that you can be in love with more than one person at the same time. I mean, anyone who has children, you love all your children, I have more than one child. Same in terms of romantic relationships. I believe that you can love more than one person at the same time. And so I was in situations in relationship with people who were at different stages of their perimenopause or postmenopause or in menopause. And so it was almost like a community environment where I was able to look at, there's nothing more intimate than being naked with somebody. All sorts of conversations come up. And so I was exploring it in that way. And it was a really supportive environment to come out into my menopause chapter or season. And so it was relatively easy. My changes have been relatively mild. And so, yeah, I guess I hate to say lucky, but I guess I am one of the ones who's been got away with it lightly, if you like. And I think some of that is because, as we know, when it comes to your experience of menopause, genes and the environment and lifestyle all can have a part to play. I had already been doing stuff inadvertently that was supporting my menopause journey without realizing it. So I'm nearly 10 years sober. I don't have caffeine. I move with intention. I make sure that I go to my movement classes 6 or 7 times a week. So I had done a whole load of things that were supporting this change already without realizing it. And so if you're concerned about your journey, do think about things that you can bring in now, new habits that you can bring in now that may well ease that transition for you.
I want to expand more on that, actually. Thank you for sharing that, because you did mention there were holistic things that we can do to curb, I guess, the changes that we're going through. So you mentioned no alcohol, no caffeine, and movement. So I'm assuming you're talking about exercise or just the flow of the body, correct? And so what other things can we do to combat these changes?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we know that there is a lot to be said for estrogen. So one of the main things that happens when we go through menopause is that our levels of estrogen nosedive. And actually, by the time we've reached our menopause journey, it's gone down by 90% in terms of our estrogen levels. So that's a lot. And estrogen is in everything. It's in so many parts of our bodies. And one might suggest that we're not supposed to live as long as we do live, because there are parts of our bodies that aren't necessarily geared to keeping going. Of course, medical science has allowed us to live longer, but we're one of very few animals that do live this long. And therefore, we are experiencing menopause. So that there are thousands of other, animals and mammals who won't go through menopause because they don't stay alive for long enough. And so in terms of estrogen is in so many different parts of our bodies. And so if we look at where, for example, exercise, we know that weight-bearing exercise is going to be good for us. That means that could be weight training. Equally, it could be things like Pilates, and it could be things like yoga, walking upstairs, gardening, things like that can support us. We also know that we have a weight gain, so that can happen, and that can affect things like self-esteem. And so with the weight gain, you might be looking at cardio exercises to help manage that. So when I went into menopause, I made 2 huge changes to my exercise program. Before that, I was doing yoga every day for 20 minutes to half an hour, sometimes an hour. I was doing yoga every day. And I was running pretty much every day for half an hour, sometimes longer, or if I was in training for a half marathon or something, then obviously I'd go at it a bit more. And I'd been doing that for a fair few years. When I started moving into menopause, I realized I wanted to make some changes that would support my body. And the two things that I moved into were spin classes, because I'd also realized that a lot of my exercise was something I did on my own. So I used an app for doing yoga. So I went into doing spin classes, which gives me cardio. It's also weight bearing because they get you to move up and down and lift little weights and do all sorts of things in the classes that I go to. And I also moved into reformer Pilates, which is one, I don't know if you have heard of reformer Pilates. It's kind of like a machine that you lie down on, and it's got kind of it's quite S&M-y, really. It's probably why I like it. It's got straps and things that you put in your legs or your arms, and you move around, and it's pressure, weight pressure. Now, I mentioned earlier things like weight gain and self-esteem. Now is the time to be working on you and things that make you feel good about you. Because what can sometimes happen to us is, I'd got to a point where I loved my body, and I was so in tune with my body and what it was doing for me. I was like, you and me, kid, we've got this. And then within a couple of months almost of me going, I am really here with my body. I am really happy with what it can and it can't do. And then, of course, menopause arrives and things start changing. You're like, hello, who is this body? What are we doing? And I made a conscious mindset decision to approach my menopause and my body in terms of, what can you do now? What can you do now? And yes, there can be a grieving process and a letting go of things that you don't do or things that you now do differently. Absolutely, that is part of it. For me, it really helped to move into that place of, let's get curious. what do I need? And therefore I was looking at my diet, I was looking at my exercise, I was looking at community and how we're born for community, right? So how I can be supported by others who are in their menopause as well. Does that answer your question?
It does, yes. Thank you. You gave us a whole list of things to think about.
I'm curious about you as a person and hearing some of your stories of, you know, your before 40, I'm assuming, but now you're transitioning into the next chapter. Did you ever get annoyed? Did you ever get frustrated? Did you ever feel like you mentioned grieving. Did you ever feel like you were losing a part of yourself, like an identity of yourself that you not now see a new you, like, you know, like you said, 10 years sober? I would say that would probably put you back in your 40s. So did you feel like frustrated, annoyed? Because I feel, you know, the foggy brain, you're talking about that. And I'm very into holistic health myself. So I'm already starting to do a lot of things. I've started weight training since last year. I've changed my diet. I've done all these things. But one of the things that seems to still be a fly buzzing around me is I get really annoyed so easily and irritated. I deal with a lot of irritability. And I'm 44. So I'm really like, okay, I'm doing all the things. I'm taking all the tinctures. I'm taking all the holistic health. I'm doing all the things right, but I'm still annoyed a lot and irritated. So did you ever experience that? And how did you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And no, I didn't. I'm very lucky that I have a phenomenal work-life balance. And I think that's where a lot of this stems from or grows out of. I prioritize my mental health and well-being. I get one, sometimes two massages a month, and that's part of my business plan because I need to be the best me to be your coach, to be your guide, to help you be the best version of you. I need to be the best version of me. So from my coaching journey and training to be an International Coaching Federation coach, and also I train coaches in how to coach as well, it gave me this impetus, if you like, to be the best me. And of course, I do get frustrated. I have a teenage daughter and it's a journey. Everything's a journey. And it is reminding me of my youth. And I'm very connected to my mum. We speak once or twice a week. And I've been having a few conversations with her about who I was and how I was as a teenager. And there were three of us that she was bringing up with my dad. So yeah, interesting point. So I guess for me, I had that sense of ease already. I had that capacity in that space. And I was able to manage it in a way that, yeah, you're going to mess up. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to shout at somebody who doesn't deserve to be shouted at. You're going to react exponentially to the situation in front of you. Those things are going to happen. It's a fact. By the end of the week, we'll have all done it once or twice in that week. So if that's the facts of the matter, how can we make that okay? Well, number one, we work on repair. We work on repair with that person. We work on bringing in tangible change, showing them that actually we made a mistake. That repair means admitting our mistakes and also working on a different way of responding in the future. So working on those sides of things can support us enormously, I think, in those situations. When you were starting to ask the question, Helen, I was thinking about the whole letting go thing that happens when you go through menopause, because of course your periods stop. And so we can't have babies. And that's a big thing that gets brought up in terms of when somebody experiences menopause. And for some people, this is devastating. And they do still want to have a family, and then that becomes something that they can't do. And that's a whole other podcast and deserves a lot of discussion, which we won't have time for today, but I wanted to honor that. What that means in terms of society is that we become surplus to requirements. We become surplus to requirements. You can't produce children, so what's the point of you? And actually, when we look at growing up in a societal environment. The point of us is to help bring up our grandchildren. The point of us is that we should be in communities. And if we look at it from a passing on the genes side of things, we want our offspring and our offspring's offspring to continue. And so we have this role in terms of that community environment and being elders in the LGBTQ environment, that community that I'm part of. We use this word elders, thinking about how things have progressed over the years in terms of freedom and acceptance and laws, and how we can learn about the present from the past, how we can learn about what we need to do in the future from the past. So I think there's something about that that's coming up for me as well.
Ooh,
I've gone
that's
off on one, but you gave me permission to go off on one.
Yes,
We're
yes,
going off on
I
one,
love it.
which
Thank
I
you.
love.
Thank you. Yes, we in our community too, I'm Apache, so we use elders as well, and it's all about passing down the wisdom. But I loved how you brought up the community part of us caring for our grandchildren. You know, that's something that we think about in certain places, but to overall think about it daily, like we are a part of community. We're part of our family community first, and then you know our second families, which are the families that chose us and we chose them. So I love that you brought that up.
I wanted to ask, what challenges might menopausal women face? We talked about, the families, but what about in the workplace, and how can they manage relationships with colleagues and supervisors during this time?
Yes. So there are some organizations that have menopause policies, and this is something that is happening more and more, which is fantastic. I work for an organization. I've put together some menopause training, awareness training for organizations in the United Kingdom where I live. And a lot of it is around awareness. A lot of it is around recognition that things that get pigeonholed into, oh, it's menopause, oh, we've got to do all these changes, we've got to do all this stuff, just because 55% of the population are going to experience this, we've got to do something about it. And interestingly, a lot of the changes that get attributed to menopause are part of growing old. The distribution of fat in our bodies changes regardless of gender. The way that our cognitive function changes happens regardless of gender. There are anxiety, depression, work, pressure that crashes in on all of us and impacts our mental health and well-being on all genders. So I think first off, it's important to recognize that anything we bring in for menopausal people actually has the potential for impacting anybody in the workplace. So having those policies in place, yes, some of those things are going to be practical changes like air conditioning, because the hot flushes are a thing. This could impact other people. I mean, there are some people are just hot people or cold people, or they just need that breeze. So things like air conditioning, things like regular breaks, well, that should be for all of us. Things like, does that team meeting have to be at 8 o'clock in the morning when some people may have slept very badly because of hot flushes and night sweats and disturbed sleep and all of those sorts of things? So we can look at the practices that are in place and think, why are they so? Do they need to be like that? Because we've got a huge percentage of people who will be off for menopausal reasons and won't admit it. And there's been research in the UK around that. So a huge amount will not be admitting that they were away because of that. And part of that is also policies. So policies saying, oh, we call that sickness. It's not an illness. Menopause isn't an illness. It's a chapter in a book, as we've decided. So if your policy is calling it sickness, then no wonder you might kind of bend the truth about what's going on for you and your experiences. Not looking out for stereotypes, making sure that people are being called on any kinds of terminology like, oh, they're having a menopausal moment, or, oh, open the window, she's having a hot flush again. all of these kinds of things, these jokes, can be hurtful. They can actually be unkind. And yes, the intention might be to lighten the mood and to have fun, and that's not how it's being received. So it's not banter, people. If it's not being received as banter, that's the point. That's the fact. So making sure that those behaviours are called on, those languages are called out in the workplace is a really important thing as well.
I think it's beautiful that you're creating this awareness training. And I don't know if it's just you specifically or in the UK, but I don't think here in the States we have something of that nature. And it's really vital that we do teach that, or we do make people aware of it, especially in the workplace. So this is such a great conversation to have. I'm going to ask my husband actually and ask him, hey, do you have awareness training of menopause? Because there are women in your workplace that may be experiencing that. And I like the fact that you said, hey, it's not banter that can be hurtful. Absolutely right. I'm not quite there yet, but I would imagine that if I am in that position and I'm in the workplace and people are making fun, then that would hurt my feelings. So I do understand where you're coming from. Thank you.
There's a disclosure issue there as well. It's nobody else's place to talk about your experience of your body and your health and well-being. So it's nobody else's right to say they're menopausal, they're going through it. And that needs to be really clear in the policies as well. I work internationally, so bring me into your husband's company. I'm there. It's all online. Yeah, no, it's true. We need to have the conversation.
I love everything you said. Like January said, I've never heard about it until today. I think yes, the first step is awareness, education, and it does start with the people closest to us. I know that when I was young, my mother used to always say, I'm just going through menopause. But she made it sound like it was the most scariest thing. And I can understand her generation. It wasn't much studied. It was, when it was studied, I believe in my research that I've done, it was by a lot of males, and a lot of mislabels, a lot of things that weren't true. It was just all over the place. So I can understand why she was so scared of it. And she has 4 daughters and 1 boy. And it was always just, wait till you hit menopause, wait till you, and it's like, oh my gosh, now I'm almost here. My mother's no longer around. I can't go to her for questions. So I'm going to the women I know who are much older, and, you as an example or guests, and because I'm seeking, and I know there's other girls and women out there like me who are just like, I'm kind of frightened. I have no idea what's going on. There's so much, an overwhelming amount of information that you're just like, I don't even know where to start. What would you say to those women who are scared, who are just like, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't even know where to start?
Yeah, I would say what worked for me is that curiosity piece, which anyone who's worked with coaches will be familiar with that piece of, okay, let me look at what's going on now. Let me look at what's actually the reality of the situation now. And that includes my concerns. What am I concerned about? Am I concerned about the impact on my relationship, on my work, on my family, on my friends? So thinking about what those concerns are, what am I prepared to do? What work am I prepared to put in around this? And where do I start? And I've got some resources which we can put into the show notes. I've got some books, some great podcasts, some social media educators that I would recommend as a starting place. We have access to so much information, and you're right. What happens is we almost get frozen in the too muchness of it. So I would say, what for you is your leading thought? Is it, oh, it's going to affect my sex life? Great. So let's start looking at that. Or is it, oh, it's going to affect my brain function? Okay, let's look at that. So lead with the thing that you're most concerned about and start from there. Otherwise, you won't do anything. You'll get too overwhelmed, and start taking those small steps. Because if you take the small steps, you will achieve the small steps, and it'll give you the impetus to go on to the next step, rather than saying, right, in 6 months' time, I'm going to be going to the gym 6 times a week. I'm going to stop smoking, stop drinking. I'm going to have this amazing outlook. That's great. We love forward planning. What are you going to do today? What are you going to do today? Oh, actually, I'm going to get off the bus one stop earlier and I'm going to walk the extra half a mile. Great, fantastic. Start that daily practice. Fabulous. Do you know what? While you're doing that new daily practice, you can also do yourself a favor and do something called thought journaling. I'm a big journaler, people. I love journaling. You can journal by writing things down. Yes, absolutely. You can have your little wizened diary and write in it with your special pen, or you can thought journal, or you can also audio journal. You might use an audio app and just leave messages for yourself, recordings for yourself. So use that time to connect with you, because journaling is about connecting with you, mind, body, and soul. It's about having conversations with yourself. And that helps you understand you, and that helps you bring out the areas that you want to be working on first in your life.
Ellie, what I'm hearing from you, a lot of what I'm hearing from you is self-care, mental care, and really digging deep within ourselves and just taking care of ourselves. And I love that you mentioned journaling, because I love journaling. I didn't think about leaving myself a message. I think I love that, actually, because a lot of the times I'm in the car. So it's nice to actually just press that record button and just start having that conversation. And I think in the midst of journaling or leaving us our recorded message, we get to know ourselves even better. And it's a measuring tool to see, hey, this is how I acted on this day. What can I do for the next day? Which was one of our questions. Our questions was, what are some healthy ways women can cope with the physical and emotional changes of menopause that also support their relationships? Because as you mentioned, we may be a little bit more testy, we may be a little bit more emotional, which makes sense because of all the estrogen that's depleting from our bodies. I think that's what you mentioned. And so some of the healthy ways so far, what I heard is journaling, audio journaling, exercise. I love that you mentioned weight bearing, because that is something that I feel we should start at 40. Like right when you turn 40, make sure that you're already doing your weight bearing exercise. And of course, eating, and you don't drink alcohol, you don't drink caffeine. So, but I don't think we talked about nutrition. So in your ways, in your opinion, what are other healthy ways that we can do to curb or to cope with the physical and emotional changes?
Mm, yeah, absolutely. I'm not an expert on nutrition, so thank you for raising that. And if it's resonating with anybody, then I absolutely urge you to go and explore that and see what is out there around that side of things. We are talking about holistic, which I love that you brought that in, January, because we are looking at mind, body, and spirituality and how we can manage those situations when it comes to being in relationships with others. You may be familiar with cortisol, which is the stress hormone. Estrogen and cortisol have a bit of a relationship together. And what estrogen does is it stops, it sort of holds cortisol back a little bit. And so if we don't have as much estrogen, cortisol goes, oh, hello, great, fabulous, woohoo. Now, this was an interesting thing for me, because one of the changes that happened when I was 51 and those sort of big changes were coming in, or big for me, not that big in the great scheme of things, but big changes, was in the morning I would wake up and my heart rate would increase, which is one of the changes that can happen for people who are menopausal. And I felt like I had this pressure on my chest, pushing down on my chest. And I labeled it as anxiety. And so I would wake up every morning thinking, what is this anxiety? Because my brain told me what my body was doing. My brain decided. So emotions are in your body, they manifest and they show up in your body. Feelings are in your head. Your head goes, oh, something happening in my body. What is that? When we talk about jealousy, sometimes we mislabel a change in our body and we call it jealousy, when actually it's envy, or it's surprise, or it's upset, or it's fear. And so I was having these big pressures, and I realized that actually it was a cortisol spike in the morning. I was getting a big cortisol spike. As soon as I got that, I was like, okay, how do I manage this cortisol spike? Breathing. And so for those 6-8 months where I was waking up every morning, the first thing I did was, obviously I was still breathing, but the first thing I did was intentional breathing. So we have this amazing nerve called the vagus nerve, which is our biggest nerve in the body, central nervous system. It supports us, our nervous system. And the vagus nerve, you can tone up, you know, like any muscle, you can tone it up, tone up the vagus nerve. And one of the ways you can do that, there's some great exercises on YouTube. Make sure that it is somebody who knows what they're talking about and not just some random. One of the things that the vagus nerve likes is when you breathe in for a shorter count than breathing out. So say you breathe in for the count of 5 and out for the count of 7. Okay, so in for 5 and out for 7. So you're pushing out more air. Vagus nerve likes that. So I started doing that breathing. It took me 30 seconds every morning. And I gave myself, I am love. So I gave myself a nice start to the day, I am love. And that supported me. The other thing that I did, because I was thinking about intentionality of everything we do when it comes to self-care and self-love and self-compassion. And I don't know if you use your phone for a ringtone. It's a little bit of a rude awakening in the mornings. So you get this horrible tone. Now, you can download songs. You can download songs. So why not wake up to a song that is part of your purpose? And so I had a song at that time that was about self-love, feeling the love, letting the love in. I changed it fairly recently because I am exactly where I am supposed to be right now in my life. And I love that. And there's this brilliant song from the 90s. It's an indie band, and it talks about being right here, right now. And that's what I wake up to every morning. This human sings at me, right here, right now. And it's like, yes, absolutely. So little things that add to the purpose of you, the reason you're here, the life you want to live, all of these things can make a difference. I've got loads to say about relationships. I feel like I've gone off down a path though, so I'm just going to pause it there.
No, I absolutely loved what you said because you gave us a lot of tips, tricks and tips. And you know that song right here, right now, that's actually a mantra that I've been living on is right here, right now, because there are moments where it could be overwhelming. And just that phrase right here, right now, takes me back to just the present moment because I know for me, I can be in my head and, think the worst of the future, think the worst of the past. And I have to hear that where I didn't even know that there was a song called Right Here, Right Now. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's by a band called Jesus Jones, and they were around when I was at university.
Awesome.
In the
Curious,
90s.
Is it the song that goes right here, right now?
Yes.
I knew
thought it was
it.
you.
It came to my head immediately. I love
It
that
made it to
song.
your shores. I'm so happy that this tiny little indie
Me too.
band traveled. Love it. Let's bring it back.
I love that song. It immediately hit my head right when you said that. I was like, I think I know it. I love it.
I was thinking it was that song. I'm like, I think that's a song, but it wasn't too sure.
Yes. Okay. So ringtones all over the world are going to be changed. And yeah, perhaps they'll do a tour. They'll come back and do a tour.
So can you discuss some of the positive aspects of this life stage that you're now in? So give us something to look forward to. Like what is awesome about this season, as you call it, in your life right now?
I mean, it was never a problem for me as a lesbian, but for straight people, you're not going to get pregnant. So that's good. For some people, obviously, that's useful. You can save a fortune on not getting pregnant. I guess the thing, I mean, let me share a good news story. A few years ago, just before lockdown, after lockdown, it'll become a phrase, won't it? Just before lockdown, I worked on this TV show and it was called Lesbian Guide to Straight Sex. And there were 4 of us, presenters and mentors for straight couples who wanted to improve their sex life. And it was a great show. It's so much fun filming it. Now, what was important about these couples is they wanted to be together. So there wasn't any kind of we're on the verge of splitting up unless we, bonk every week. So they loved each other. They wanted to work. They wanted to solve this together as a team, which is great. And I think that's a really good metaphor for any kind of changes that happen in your relationship. You know, yes, we're talking about menopause here. Your partner could lose their job. There could be bereavement. There could be mental health and well-being changes. Any sorts of changes can come at any point from either of you in your partnership. So one of the mindset things you can do is approach it as a team, because that takes out blame. And if you are bringing in blame, it's a you thing. It's not an us thing. It's a you thing. You're actually wrong. It is an us thing, because yes, there are three entities in our relationship. There's the you, there's the me, and there's the relationship. And this part is affecting the relationship. So we need to be a team on this. We need to be researching this together. You need to be going off to the podcasts and listening to them as well. You need to be reading the books. I love having a weekly ritual with your partner whereby you choose a podcast, take it in turns every week to choose a podcast, listen to it together, and listen to it sped up. It's half an hour of your life. It's brilliant. So listen to the podcast and then go for a walk, or get out in nature, or go for a drive, or whatever is right for you. And traveling, you know, however you to travel through life, thinking about the different ways that people exist in the world and travel through the world. So pick a way that you can be doing something together, traveling, being in nature, and have a chat about the podcast, what's come up for you. That is a great way, because it can help you talk about a shared reference point. It takes it slightly off you being the one that brings everything up in the first instance, which can feel incredibly vulnerable. You've got a shared conversation. Oh, wasn't it interesting when they talked about XYZ? That's actually been my experience, or I've been wondering about that for our relationship as well. So having that shared reference point. Anyway, the lesbians and our working on this show, we had this one couple, and they were my responsibility. So we had to do different things with different couples, and and I was the eldest lesbian there. So I think this is why that they were passed to me. And this couple she was going through menopause, and they had come up with this wonderful phrase. They called menopause Lady M. Lady M. So they gave her an identity, which I thought was a genius idea. Now, Lady M would make an appearance sometimes, and Lady M meant that the woman wasn't in the mood, or she wanted a different type of intimacy, or, you know, sex was painful and they needed to look at different things to do. So there were ways that Lady M would make an appearance. And so they used that as a shared conversation, as a shared discussion. Now, we lesbians had to set tasks, and the task that I set for them was to explore their sexuality in a different way. And so they went to these classes, and they were able to explore connection and sexuality and intimacy. They were tantra classes, and they were able to connect in a way that I never connected before. And I'm getting tingles remembering it. It was just amazing, the way that it refreshed and renewed their relationship, because it goes back to what we said earlier. Sometimes we get stuck in it's not like that anymore. I wish things were how they were, rather than looking at the reality of the now. I mean, regardless of menopause, if you've been with someone for a while, what floats your boat now is going to be different from what floated your boat earlier. Things work in different ways. Things change. So you've got to be looking at what's working for you and your sex and your intimacy. And so having that shared curiosity, being able to approach different ways of connecting, looking at those little insidious expectations that can come in and tell us this is how it needs to be, everything needs to be wonderful, these are the conditions, when actually, give yourself a break, have a look at what's possible now. Yeah, great to plan some of those things, but actually maybe right now this is what we need to be focusing on with our connection time together.
I absolutely love what you said about preparation. That's basically what you're saying. It's preparation and Lady M. So there's a few things. Preparation. I actually have been telling my children and my husband about menopause, because I feel it's important to start that conversation and just help them be more aware of, hey, mom might actually do this. And I don't mean to do this, but this is just a part of my journey. And so I've been sending them articles as well, but about menopause or perimenopause. But I think it's really important to have that conversation early so that I'm trying to combat a like outright war and outright like just tension in the household. So that is the one thing that I am trying to do, and also send those articles. But what I love what you said was that, hey, why don't you pick a podcast, me and my partner, my husband, and discuss it. And I think that's wonderful. That's genius. And I love the whole idea of Lady M. I call my period Aunt Flo. And so whenever Aunt Flo comes around, I will tell my husband or whoever, I'm like, Aunt Flo is here. So that's keyword for something else. So I love Lady M. That's genius.
Ah, that's brilliant. Yeah, yeah, using that language and that family and that little ritual that you have as well as part of your family. Rituals are fantastic for bonding families. It's interesting because premenstrual tension that a lot of people do experience who menstruate, elements of premenstrual tension are what you will experience in menopause as well. So some of those declines happen. So in premenstrual tension, you've got estrogen going down a little bit, and you've survived that and you've managed that. And I know some people have horrendous experiences, so I don't want to put you off. I'm just saying that people who go through menopause are resilient buggers, and some of that stuff you've already had as part of your monthly cycle.
I think there's another word that you mentioned earlier, intentionality. And Helen and I have talked about this before, about being really intentional about just who we are as people and the direction that we want our lives to be taken. And I love that you mentioned that being intentional. And this conversation has just been so eye-opening, and I'm really excited to share it. And for a lot of men and partners, girlfriends, wives, to listen to this, because this is vital. This is vital for us because there are changes. And you mentioned earlier that there's not that there's no use, but when we look at the past and we say, oh, I miss this or I miss that, and I know I've done that. I've looked at my 20-year-old self and I'm like, where did she go? What happened? In fact, I was probably just telling my husband this last night. I said, oh, I'm not my 20-year-old self. And that's okay. That's okay. And I think that we have to come to a place of acceptance and a place of just embracing this next chapter, like Helen was saying. And with your knowledge, with your just the way that you have explained everything, it has just broken it down in such a beautiful, graceful way. And so I just thank you. I thank you for sharing your knowledge. One of my questions, though, and I did want to ask this question, is the resources. What resources do you recommend for couples to learn more about
Mm.
menopause, premenopause?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good one. And when we think about menopause, the massive change that can happen for us is how we feel about ourselves. And so how we feel about ourselves is going to impact the relationship. How we feel about the body changes, how we feel about how we operate in the world. And so part of it is what we've talked about earlier in terms of you looking after you. Now is the time for you to look after you and to celebrate the things, recognize the things that work really well. When you asked me earlier about what do I love about menopause, actually it's more tied into what do I love about aging, because there's a lot of stuff that I really don't care about anymore. And it's fascinating bringing up a teenager who cares about a lot of stuff that I cared about when I was a teenager as well, that now I just don't care because it's a them thing and it's not a me thing, and I don't even know them and they don't even know me. So if I've walked down the street and I've worn something stupid or something's gone weird or I've said something silly, doesn't matter. doesn't matter. I'm going to repair myself really damn quickly. So part of the resources are about you and loving you and looking at the things. Now is the time for you to invest in you. There are some physical things that you might want to do in terms of your environment, airflow in your bedroom, bed sheets that are made of breathable fabrics. Massage is great for menopause. Skin, anything on skin, massage is a fantastic area. If you know, obviously it's a massaging each other. You don't have to invest in it. We've talked about the healthy eating side of things. Looking emotional solutions would be things like the supportive communities, seeing it as a shared situation with you and your partner, having relationship check-ins on a regular basis. This is something that we should be doing anyway. Weekly check-ins, that time where it's just you and your partner. And I know that's difficult with children, especially young children. It's paramount because that relationship needs investment. That relationship needs that time investment. Otherwise, it will get impacted. So making sure you've got that half hour with the phone away and with an agenda, actually saying we're going to talk about the things. Let's write down 3 things that we want to talk about in this half hour, and then let's hug at the end of it, or let's connect at the end of it. There's procedures that you can follow. I talk about this with my clients to have effective check-ins like you do in the workplace, really. In terms of sex solutions, this is a time for you to, with the self-esteem side of things, choosing something you enjoy, choosing something you love, and making sure that your self-esteem is growing. So what kinds of activities make you feel good about yourself? What kinds of things have you stopped doing that you can start doing again that you loved? Maybe you loved reading, maybe you loved playing tennis, maybe you loved going for seafront walks. Maybe you loved cooking a special meal, whatever it is. See if you can bring back some of those things that you're good at and make you feel good about you. Affirmations: I feel love, I am loved, I deserve love, I am emotionally healthy. Affirmations are positive, they're present, and they're personal. The 3 Ps, as I call them. So having those as your daily mantra, and you can bring them in. You can do something called habit stacking. You can bring in an affirmation and you can make it stick by doing this thing called habit stacking. So habit stacking is something that is talked about in a brilliant book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And you stick something that you already do with a new thing. So my habit stacking for my affirmations was stuck on making the bed. I make the bed every day. I just do it. It's part of a thing. I don't even think about it. The day that I decided to put my affirmation on my bed making is the day I did it from thenceforth. Because when you habit stack, it doesn't take any more time out of your day at all. You just stick it on top of something you're already doing. Might be when you're brushing your teeth. So it becomes stuck to it. You do it. Brilliant. You do you. Fabulous. With relationships and the changes that are happening around menopause, now is a fantastic time to be having renewed conversations about your relationship and where it's at. These are conversations about: what is my love language? What is my sexual design, as in how do I relate to sex? What is my attraction style, as in what is it? Am I attracted to aesthetics? Am I attracted? There's so many different types of attraction. There's smell attraction, there's romantic attraction, there's physical attraction. How does my attraction system work? Because it may have changed over the years. Different types of desire. Brilliant book called Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski talks about spontaneous desire and responsive desire. No time to go into it, but check that out and you will see that it's an eye-opener. So there's books that will support you on how do I relate to sex, desire, and pleasure now? And what do I want to move into? What conversations can I have with my partner? There's another fantastic book called Mind the Gap by Dr. Karen Gurney, who's also called The Sex Doctor. And she talks about the orgasm gap. 95% of heterosexual cis men orgasm in sex. 65% of heterosexual cis women orgasm in sex. Why? Because we've been told sex is penis in vagina, when actually the best way for a person to orgasm who has a vagina is clitoral stimulation. That's the bit that's sometimes missing. And actually, when we talk about what happens to your body during menopause, you are going to potentially have to use things like lubrication in a different way, or even start using lubrication. I mean, I'm all over lube. Let's not shame the lube thing, people. Lubrication has been invented for us to have phenomenal sex. Why would we be embarrassed talking about it? It's going to give you, it's going to help you. It's going to enhance that. So if you need to use it, fantastic, use it. Brilliant. It's going to be a world of difference for you. It's going to help. So thinking about renewed conversations and how your relationship is right now and any of those sorts of changes.
Wow, you have given us so much to think about, so much value. I'm already ignited. A lot of what you said has given me journal prompts in spending more time to look at me, how I'm developing my own self-care, my mental health, and I immediately want to book a massage. That's actually something I have been wanting to do for a while, that I'm just like, I'll do it next week. I'll do it, tomorrow. It's always another day. And then there's the researching. Who's a good massage therapist that'll connect with me and align with me and give me all the woo-woo feeling, all that. And that's what's holding me off. But now I'm like, book it, Helen. Like, don't even play around. Like, this is gonna be amazing. So thank you for that. I'm excited.
Literal research saying that massages will support your menopause journey. So yeah, do that. I love that for you.
Thank you.
I'm really excited about my next coming massages. I have here in Hawaii, I think that it's in the mainland, we have something called Massage Envy, and maybe it's in the UK, I don't know, but Massage Envy. Anyway, it just dawned on me that ME, Massage Envy, because that's their logo, stands for me. I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. And so I do have massages lined up. Had no idea that it would help me with my menopause journey. So that's another amazing tool. So thank you. I've loved this conversation. Absolutely love this conversation, and excited to share. I will talk to my husband about sharing this in his own workplace, because there are women and I know a couple of them, and I don't think it's talked about. And I like that we're trying to not trying, but we are going to desensitize the whole stigma of, oh my gosh, it's menopause and it's horrible. And it's not. It's not. There's actually another book called The Feminine Brain. I believe that was it. We
The
had
female brain.
The Female Brain. Beautiful book about just accepting the change as well. And she was our other guest here. So shout out to, oh gosh,
Dr. Luann Brizadine.
Yes, thank you. So I love that we're conversating about this. Now I do want to, we're actually at the top of the hour. So I want to honor your time. This has been so amazing. It just went by so fast.
Can I say two more very quick things? They might not make the edit, so I accept that. Two books that I would absolutely recommend, because we're talking about books here. I read this brilliant book called Menopause Bootcamp by Suzanne Gillberg-Lenz. And she is a doctor and she practices Western and Eastern medicine. So her book talks about Western and Eastern medicine, and she goes into Ayurvedic approaches to menopause. It's brilliant. I love that book so much. Another book, which is, hopefully you can buy it international, and again, it opened my eyes for the Black community, is called Menopause and Black, and it's edited by Yansie, Rolson and Yvonne Christie, and it is people's stories of their menopause experience in the Black in the BIPOC community. So I recommend that in terms of finding community and looking at the wider picture around menopause. And I also wanted to say, just really, really quickly, it's important for us, particularly when we're mentioning the business side of things, to recognize that not all women go through menopause, and not all people who have menopause are women. So I tend to use the phrase menopausal people. You'll have heard me using it, and it's the same amount of words as saying menopausal women, except it's more inclusive to say menopausal people. And that means we are talking about non-binary people, trans people, and people who don't align with the word woman. basically.
Thank you. Can you actually add in, and I love that you said menopausal people. I feel like that's another topic of conversation for another podcast. So maybe we'll think about having you again so we can follow up. But are there anything else, or is there anything else that you'd like to share and add at the top of the hour?
Yeah, thank you. So you can reach me on alihendry.co.uk. That's where all of my information is. I'm most active on Instagram, and you can find me on Ali Hendry Coaching. You can also find me on LinkedIn if you're interested in any kind of business connection at all. In terms of my offerings, I've got a couple of offerings at the moment. One is around journaling, and it's to support people to make their journaling practice stick. So I've got an offering around that. And the other offering that I've got is around supporting people who want to do a TED Talk. Because part of my history is a big old show off. I worked in theatre for years, wrote plays, directed plays, all of those sorts of things. That's another whole conversation about a side of me. And so I support people with their public speaking journeys, and also those that want to do a TED Talk. So yeah, it'd be great to connect with people who have resonated with anything we've talked about. And thank you so much for your awesome questions.
Helen, where can we find you?
Oh my God, such a pleasure. I'm so excited, and I can't wait for this episode to get out to our audience. So thank you again, Ali. Like Ali mentioned earlier, affirmations, and I just launched my digital Protect the Throne affirmation, so you can get those in my link. I'm also the author of Nothing Sexier Than Freedom, available on Audible and Amazon. So thank you so much. And January, where can they find you?
Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Ali, again for coming on the show. You can find me at januaryliddell.com. That has all of my list of services, along with my book, Alina, the Super Saver. So it is a book about financial literacy. And you can also find me on Facebook, Anchored Financial LLC, both on Facebook and Instagram. And then Alina, the Honeymaker, on Instagram and on Facebook. Thank you so much. We had a great conversation today. Please email or message us any questions that you may have so that we can connect you to Ali. It'll also be in the show notes. But also, please share this with another girlfriend of yours who may be also going through menopause.
Thank you, everyone.
Aloha.
Ahia.
Want to hear more?
Visit us at sexyfreedommedia.com.